The gates of Blackstone Cemetery creaked in the autumn wind as Thaddeus Mercer knelt before a polished marble headstone. 8 years to the day since he'd lost Octavia, and the pain hadn't dulled. It had simply transformed into something he'd learned to carry. Rain began to fall, droplets sliding down his face, indistinguishable from tears, as he placed a bouquet of rare blue orchids, her favorite, against the cold stone. As twilight descended, the 47-year-old tech magnate pulled his coat tighter and turned to leave, another anniversary visit complete. That's when he saw them. 4 small figures huddled against the cemetery's wrought iron gate, seeking shelter from the strengthening downpour. Children, by the size of them. What were children doing alone at a cemetery at this hour? Curious and concerned, Thaddeus approached, his security detail hanging back at a respectful distance. The children, boys he could now see, were asleep, curled around each other like puppies seeking warmth. Identical faces, quadruplets. Beside them sat a battered suitcase and a framed photograph facing downward on the wet pavement. As Thaddeus reached for the photo, lightning illuminated the sky, and for a moment he glimpsed something impossible, Octavia's smile looking back at him from the frame. His heart stuttered, then pounded against his ribs. With trembling fingers, he lifted the photograph, and the world as he knew it shattered around him. It was indeed Octavia, looking exactly as she had 8 years ago, surrounded by 4 identical toddlers with her golden brown eyes and his unmistakable cleft chin. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The eldest boy stirred first, rubbing sleep from eyes identical to Thaddeus's own. They were approximately 7 years old. The math aligned perfectly with Octavia's death. The child regarded him with a wary, intelligent gaze before gently waking his brothers. "Are you Mr. Mercer?" the boy asked, his voice steady despite his circumstances. Thaddeus couldn't speak, couldn't process what stood before him. 4 miniature reflections of himself, with Octavia's golden-flecked eyes and determined chin. He managed a nod. "I'm Zephyr," the boy continued. "These are my brothers, Phoenix, Atlas, and Orion." Each boy acknowledged his name with varying degrees of shyness and curiosity. "Aunt Persephone said we should find you here today. She said you always bring blue flowers." "Aunt Persephone?" Thaddeus finally found his voice. "Octavia's sister! Where is she?" The boys exchanged glances tinted with fresh grief. The one, introduced as Atlas stepped forward, the most solemn of the 4. "She died last week," he explained, with the peculiar directness children sometimes possess when discussing tragedy. "The cancer came back. Her last wish was for us to find our father. You." Rain continued to fall, soaking through the boys' thin jackets. Thaddeus's security detail shifted uncomfortably nearby, uncertain how to proceed with this unexpected development. Through the fog of shock, Thaddeus's protective instincts surfaced. "Let's get you out of this rain," he said gently, making a split-second decision that would alter the trajectory of 5 lives forever. "We can talk somewhere warm." Phoenix, distinguishable by a small birthmark near his left eyebrow, looked up at the imposing figure of their alleged father. "Are you taking us home with you?" The question hung in the damp air between them, loaded with implications Thaddeus couldn't begin to untangle. Home. His modernist mansion on the cliffs overlooking the Atlantic, designed for solitude and filled with priceless art and cutting-edge technology, was hardly a place for children. Yet these weren't just any children. "Yes," he answered, surprising himself with the certainty in his voice. "Yes, I am." As Thaddeus's sleek vehicle pulled away from Blackstone Cemetery, his mind raced with questions. How was this possible? Octavia had died before they could reconcile, After their bitter separation, there had been no mention of a pregnancy, let alone quadruplets. Why had Persephone kept this secret? And most pressingly, what was he supposed to do now with 4 7-year-old boys who were apparently his sons? The drive to Lighthouse Point, where Thaddeus's mansion perched on dramatic cliffside terrain, passed in awkward silence, punctuated by occasional whispers between the boys. Thaddeus observed them through the rearview mirror, noting their coordinated movements, a secret language of gestures and glances that spoke of their profound connection to one another. "Whoa, you live in a lighthouse?" Orion, the smallest of the 4, exclaimed as they approached the dramatic silhouette of Thaddeus's home, a converted 19th century lighthouse adjoined to a sprawling modern structure of glass and steel. "Something like that," Thaddeus replied, momentarily seeing his residence through fresh eyes, the imposing, isolated nature of it suddenly apparent. Inside, the boys' eyes widened at the austere luxury surrounding them. The minimalist furniture, the floor-to-ceiling windows facing the churning ocean, the floating staircase spiraling up through the lighthouse tower, none of it designed with children in mind. "Are you hungry?" Thaddeus asked, realizing he had no idea what 7-year-olds. "Udi." 4 heads nodded in unison. 20 minutes later, Thaddeus's personal chef, hastily summoned from his private quarters, watched in bewilderment as he prepared simple grilled cheese sandwiches for 4 identical boys who had materialized out of nowhere. As they ate, Thaddeus studied them. Each boy, despite their identical DNA, already showed distinct personalities. Zephyr, clearly the self-appointed leader, kept a protective eye on his brothers. Phoenix fidgeted constantly, full of restless energy. Atlas observed everything with quiet intensity, while Orion asked endless questions between bites of sandwich. "Did you know about us?" Atlas finally asked the question Thaddeus had been dreading. "No," he answered honestly. "I had no idea your mother was expecting before she died." "Aunt Persephone said Mom wanted to tell you herself," Zephyr explained, "but then there were complications with the pregnancy. She left." "You a letter?" Phoenix added, reaching into his backpack. "Aunt Persephone kept it all these years. She said we could only give it to you when we met you." Thaddeus accepted the envelope with trembling hands, recognizing Octavia's elegant handwriting. Immediately, the paper had yellowed slightly with age, but her presence seemed to leap from the cursive that spelled his name. "I'll read this later," he said, tucking it into his jacket pocket, unwilling to face whatever revelations it contained while surrounded by 4 pairs of curious eyes, her eyes. As the boys finished eating, Thaddeus's phone buzzed insistently. Valencia Reyes, his fiancée of 6 months, was calling for the 3rd time. With a deep breath, he excused himself to answer. "Thaddeus, darling, where are you?" Valencia's voice carried the slight edge it always did when he deviated from their carefully planned schedule. "The Vanguard Foundation Gala starts in an hour. I'm already dressed." The gala he'd completely forgotten. Silas Vanguard's annual charity event was the networking centerpiece of the season, an obligation he couldn't easily dismiss, especially with the precarious merger negotiations between their companies. "Something's come up," he said carefully. "A family matter." "Family?" Valencia's surprise was evident. "What family?" Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. All your relatives are gone. It's one of the things we have in common, remember? The irony of the timing wasn't lost on Thaddeus. Just last week, Valencia had been pressing him about starting a family of their own, suggesting they begin fertility treatments immediately after their upcoming wedding. He had demurred, as he always did when the subject arose. After losing Octavia, the prospect of another family had seemed impossible. "I can't explain right now," he replied. "I need to handle this situation. You should go without me." Valencia's displeasure radiated through the phone, This is about the merger, Thaddeus. Silas expects us both there. Whatever family crisis has emerged can surely wait until tomorrow. Before he could respond, Atlas appeared in the doorway, his solemn eyes taking in Thaddeus's distress. "We can wait here," the boy offered quietly. "We're good at waiting. We waited at Aunt Persephone's house for 3 days after she died, before the social worker came." The simple statement, delivered with such matter-of-fact acceptance, pierced Thaddeus's heart. These children, his children, had already experienced too much loss, too much waiting. "No," Thaddeus said firmly, addressing both Atlas and Valencia. "No more waiting. Valencia, I won't be attending tonight. We'll discuss this tomorrow." He ended the call despite Valencia's protests and turned to Atlas. "Let's find rooms for you and your brothers. You're not going anywhere." Later that night, after installing the boys in guest suites never before occupied by children, Thaddeus sat alone in his study, Octavia's letter before him on the desk. Outside, the lighthouse beam swept across the dark waters in endless rotation, just as his thoughts circled the impossible situation he now faced. With a deep breath, he opened the envelope. "My dearest Thaddeus, if you're reading this, then I am gone, and our sons have finally found their way to you. Yes, our sons. I discovered I was pregnant 3 weeks after our separation. The experimental fertility treatment we had begun in those final desperate months of our marriage, the one we were told had failed, had succeeded beyond anyone's expectations. 4 heartbeats, Thaddeus. 4 perfect miracles when we had given up hope of even one. I wanted to tell you immediately, but your words from our last argument haunted me. I've built an empire that demands everything. There's no room for distractions." Would you have seen our children as distractions too? I planned to tell you after they were born, to show you their perfect faces and give you the chance to fall in love with them as I had. But complications arose. The doctors aren't certain I'll survive their birth. If you're reading this, I didn't. I've asked Persephone to raise them until they're old enough to understand, to tell them about you gradually, to show them the man I fell in love with. Not the tycoon the world knows, but the brilliant, compassionate dreamer who once built me. A telescope because I mentioned missing the stars of my childhood. Our time together ended in bitterness, but what came before was beautiful. Remember that when you look at them. See me in their smiles, but also see yourself. The best parts of yourself that I fear you've forgotten. They deserve a father, Thaddeus, not an empire, not a legacy, not a distant benefactor, a father. Can you be that for them? For me? With eternal love despite everything, Octavia. Thaddeus read the letter 3 times, tears flowing freely down his face. The experimental fertility treatment, their last attempt to create the family they'd both desperately wanted before his company, Nexus Dynamics, had consumed him. Before the arguments about his long hours, his emotional distance, his prioritization of business over their marriage, the treatment they'd been told had failed. In the bathroom adjoining his study, Thaddeus splashed cold water on his face and stared at his reflection. 8 years of relentless work had etched permanent lines around his eyes. His once dark hair was now salted with gray at the temples. Would Octavia even recognize the man he'd become? A small noise from the doorway interrupted his thoughts. Orion stood there in borrowed pajamas that engulfed his small frame, clutching a worn stuffed fox. "I can't sleep," the boy admitted. "The ocean is too loud." Thaddeus had long ago stopped noticing the constant soundtrack of waves crashing against the cliffs below his home. "It does take some getting used to," he acknowledged. "Can I see the lighthouse light?" Orion asked hopefully. "Aunt Persephone had a book about lighthouses. She said they guide people home." Something about the simple request broke through the fog of shock surrounding Thaddeus. He offered his hand to the small boy, his son, and was surprised by the warm, trusting grip that met his. let's go see it together," he said softly. They climbed the spiral staircase to the glass-enclosed top of the lighthouse, now automated, but still functional. The massive lens rotated slowly, sending its powerful beam out to sea in hypnotic rhythm. "It's like a giant robot eye," Orion whispered, awestruck. Thaddeus smiled despite himself. "I suppose it is." "Did you build it?" "No, this lighthouse is very old. I just restored it." Orion nodded thoughtfully. "Aunt Persephone said you build things, important things that help people." Idum, the simple description of his life's work, stripped of stock prices, market capitalization, and competitive advantages, caught Thaddeus off guard. Was that how Octavia had described him to her sister? How Persephone had described him to his sons? "I try to," he answered carefully, "although sometimes I forget the helping people part." Orion leaned against the railing, his small face illuminated each time the lighthouse beam swept around. "Mom's picture is on our bedside tables. All four of us have the same one. Aunt Persephone said it helps Mom watch over us while we sleep." Thaddeus's throat tightened. "That's a nice thought." "We don't have a picture of you," Orion continued matter-of-factly. "Aunt Persephone said it made you too sad to think about us." The innocent misunderstanding of the situation struck Thaddeus like a physical blow. These boys had grown up believing their father knew about them, but chose to stay away because the memory was too painful. "That's not true," he said gently, kneeling to meet Orion's eyes, Octavia's eyes. "I didn't know about you until today. If I had known, I would have been there. I promise you that." Orion studied him with the unnerving directness only children possess. "Atlas says promises don't mean much. People break them all the time." Thaddeus winced at the cynicism in one so young. "He's right that some people break promises. I've broken some myself, but this one I would have kept." The boy seemed to accept this, returning his gaze to the lighthouse mechanism. After a moment, he asked, "Are you going to send us away?" "No," Thaddeus answered without hesitation. "No, I'm not. Even though you have a big company and important meetings. Aunt Persephone watched you on the business channel sometimes. She said you're very busy." Thaddeus considered his answer carefully, aware that his word would be carried back to 3 other pairs of identical ears. "I am busy," he acknowledged, "but nothing is more important than you and your brothers. I'm just learning what that means." Orion yawned suddenly, the late hour catching up with him. Thaddeus instinctively scooped him up, surprised at how natural it felt to carry his son back down the winding stairs. "Will your girlfriend like us?" Orion mumbled against his shoulder, already half asleep. The question stopped Thaddeus mid-step. Valencia. In the chaos of the evening, he'd almost forgotten their angry exchange. Valencia, whose every life choice was calculated for maximum efficiency and benefit. Valencia, who had been drawn to him, partly because of his apparent disinterest in traditional family structures. "I don't know," he answered honestly, "but that's for her to figure out, not you." By the time he tucked Orion back into bed, the boy was already asleep. In the connecting rooms, the other 3 slumbered peacefully, their identical faces relaxed, in sleep. Thaddeus stood in the doorway, watching them breathe, overwhelmed by the fierce protectiveness surging through him. These were his sons, his and Octavia's, the family they'd once desperately wanted. His phone vibrated with an incoming call from Valencia, but Thaddeus silenced it without answering. Whatever fallout awaited him from his missed appearance at the Vanguard Gala could wait until morning. Right now, in this moment, nothing existed beyond these 4 small boys who had appeared like ghosts from his past. Except they weren't ghosts. They were flesh and blood. They were real, and they were his responsibility now. Morning brought chaos to the previously ordered confines of Lighthouse Point. Thaddeus, who typically woke at precisely 5:30 a.m. to review international markets before His morning run, instead, found himself startled awake at 6:15 by the sound of something shattering, followed by urgent whispers and the patter of small feet. He found the boys in the kitchen, surrounded by the remains of what had once been an artisanal ceramic fruit bowl. Phoenix stood in the center of the destruction, looking mortified. "I was just trying to reach the apples," he explained, eyes wide with worry. "Are you mad?" Thaddeus, still processing the sight of 4 children in his formerly pristine kitchen, took a moment to respond. "No, I'm not mad. Are you hurt?" Phoenix shook his head, relieved. "Then it's just a bowl. Bowls can be replaced." The words felt foreign in his mouth. He, who had once spent 40 minutes berating an assistant for mishandling a limited edition prototype watch. As his private chef prepared breakfast with barely concealed bewilderment, Thaddeus's phone erupted with notifications, missed calls from Valencia, text messages from his executive team, emails marked urgent regarding the Vanguard merger. The real world was intruding on the surreal bubble of the past 12 hours. "I need to make some calls," he told the boys as they settled at the breakfast bar with pancakes. "Will you be all right here for a few minutes?" 4 heads nodded in unison, mouths already sticky with syrup. In his study, Thaddeus first called his chief of security, Dominic. "I need a complete background check on Persephone Winters," he instructed, "and I need verification of paternity for 4 minors, discreetly." Next, he called his personal attorney, Eleanor Zhao, explaining the situation in clinical terms that belied his inner turmoil. "You need to file for emergency custody immediately," Eleanor advised after listening to his account. "If these children are indeed yours and their legal guardian has deceased, you want to establish your rights before they enter the system." "They won't be entering any system," Thaddeus replied with unexpected vehemence. "They're staying with me." "Nevertheless," Eleanor continued calmly, "we need proper documentation. I'll begin the process today. And Thaddeus, you might want to consider how this will affect your prenuptial agreement with Ms. Reyes. There are significant clauses regarding previously unknown heirs." The prenup, another complication he hadn't considered. Valencia had insisted on extensive legal protections before their engagement, standard procedure she'd called it, given their respective fortunes. "Handle the custody issues first," he instructed. "The rest can wait." His final call was to his executive assistant, Marlowe, to clear his schedule for the day. "But sir," Marlowe protested, "you have the board presentation at 10, followed by the merger committee at noon, and Silas Vanguard himself requested a private meeting after you missed the gala last night." "Reschedule all of it," Thaddeus said, firmly. "Sir, with all due respect, the Vanguard merger is at a critical stage. Your absence last night already raised concerns among the board members." Silas was quite upset. "Marlowe," Thaddeus interrupted, "for the first time in 8 years, something has happened that is more important than Nexus dynamics, more important than Silas Vanguard, and more important than any merger. I need today. The company will survive without me for 24 hours. Silence greeted his unprecedented statement. Then cautiously, "Is everything all right, sir?" Before Thaddeus could respond, a commotion erupted from the kitchen. He rushed back to find Atlas and Phoenix engaged in an escalating argument over the last pancake, while Zephyr attempted to mediate and Orion watched wide-eyed from behind his orange juice. "Boys," Thaddeus said sharply, his boardroom voice automatically engaging. 4 heads swiveled toward him in perfect synchronization. "We can make more pancakes," he said, softening his tone. "There's no need to fight." "Sorry," Atlas muttered. Releasing his grip on the disputed plate, Thaddeus returned to his call. "Marlowe, I'm going to need you to order some things. Children's clothing, 4 sets of everything, size for 7-year-old boys, and books, educational toys." Whatever 7-year-olds need these days. The silence on the other end of the line stretched even longer. "Marlowe, are you still there?" "Yes, sir," came the stunned reply. Should I ask what's happened?" Thaddeus watched as his chef, now recovered from his initial shock, demonstrated to the boys how to flip pancakes in the pan, eliciting delighted gasps as a perfect golden disc somersaulted through the air. "Duh, I've become a father," he said simply. "Times 4. After ending the call, Thaddeus rejoined the boys at the breakfast counter, accepting a fresh cup of coffee from his still bemused chef. "What happens now?" Zephyr asked, his role as spokesperson, for the quadruplets apparently well established. "Now," Thaddeus replied, "we get to know each other and figure out what comes next." A knock at the front door interrupted the moment. Dominic appeared in the kitchen doorway, his expression carefully neutral. "Ms. Reyes is here, sir." Thaddeus checked his watch. Not even 8 a.m. Valencia was nothing if not prompt when displeased. "Boys, can you stay here and finish breakfast? I need to speak with someone." Atlas eyed him suspiciously. "Is it your girlfriend, the one from the magazine covers?" Thaddeus blinked, surprised they knew about Valencia. "Yes, actually. Aunt Persephone had lots of magazines," Phoenix explained through a mouthful of pancake. "Your girlfriend is very pretty, but Aunt Persephone said she looks like a shark dressed up for tea." Zephyr elbowed his brother sharply. "We're not supposed to repeat that." Despite the tension of the moment, Thaddeus had to suppress a smile at the surprisingly apt description. "I won't be long," he promised, following Dominic to the foyer. Valencia Reyes stood framed in the doorway, impeccable as always in a tailored white pantsuit that set off her olive complexion and sleek dark hair. Her expression, however, was thunderous. "What exactly constitutes a family emergency when you have no family, Thaddeus?" she demanded without preamble. "Do you have any idea how it looked when I arrived alone? Silas spent half the evening asking where you were. Valencia, something has happened. The merger is hanging by a thread," she continued, stalking past him into the house. "Silas was counting on last night to finalize the terms. Now he's questioning your commitment. The board is nervous. The stock is already down 3 points this morning."
"Valencia," Thaddeus tried again, "I need to tell you something important. More important than the deal we've spent a year negotiating, the deal that would make Nexus Vanguard the most powerful tech conglomerate in the hemisphere. What could—"
"Possibly." She stopped abruptly as Orion appeared in the hallway, curious eyes taking in the newcomer. "Hello?" he said politely. "Are you the shark lady?" Valencia's perfectly sculpted eyebrows rose toward her hairline. "Excuse me? Thaddeus, why is there a child in your house? And did he just call me a shark?" Before Thaddeus could respond, the other 3 boys appeared behind their brother, drawn by the commotion. "Whoa!" Phoenix whispered loudly. "She's even prettier in person." Valencia stared at the 4 identical faces, then at Thaddeus, her expression shifting from anger to confused disbelief. "What is going on? Who are these children?" Thaddeus took a deep breath. "Valencia, these are my sons, Zephyr, Phoenix, Atlas, and Orion." He gestured to each boy in turn. "Boys, this is Ms. Reyes." "Your sons?" Valencia repeated, as if the words were in a foreign language. "Since when do you have children, let alone 4 identical ones?" "Since about 8 years ago, apparently," Thaddeus answered. "I only learned about them yesterday. Their mother was Octavia, my ex-wife." Valencia's shock gave way to calculation, her analytical mind visibly processing this new information and its implications. "This changes everything," she said finally, her voice low. "The succession plans, the prenup, the corporate structure." "Valencia," Thaddeus interrupted gently, "I think we should discuss this privately." She nodded stiffly, following him toward his study while casting backward glances at the quadruplets, who watched the adults retreat with undisguised interest. Inside the study, Valencia paced like a caged animal. "This is why you missed the gala. You found out you have quadruplets?" "They were at the cemetery when I visited Octavia's grave yesterday," Thaddeus explained. "Their aunt, Octavia's sister, who has been raising them, died recently. They came to find me." "And you're certain they're yours? This couldn't be some elaborate con?" The suggestion sparked an unexpected flare of anger in Thaddeus. "Look at them, Valencia. They have my eyes, my chin, my gestures, and they have Octavia's features too." Valencia's expression hardened. "You should still get a DNA test before you upend everything. Children change the equation completely." "You've talked about wanting children yourself," Thaddeus pointed. "Out. After the wedding." "Children we planned together," she countered. "1 or 2, with proper timing and preparation. Not 4 ready-made boys with unknown backgrounds and expectations. We need to think about this logically." The word struck. Thaddeus is fundamentally wrong for the situation. Logic had its place in business, in negotiations, in market analysis. But these were children, his children, and they didn't fit into logical frameworks or strategic plans. "There's nothing to think about," he said firmly. "They're my sons. They've lost both their mother and the aunt who raised them. They have nowhere else to go." Valencia sat down heavily on the leather sofa, her usual poise momentarily abandoned. "You can't possibly intend to raise them yourself. There are boarding schools, specialized facilities." "They're staying with me," Thaddeus interrupted, surprised by the conviction in his voice. "I've already missed 7 years. I won't miss any more." Something shifted in Valencia's expression, a coolness, a distancing. "I see. And where exactly do I fit into this new family picture?" The question hung between them, weighted with implications. Thaddeus had no ready answer. "I don't know," he admitted. "This is all happening very fast. I'm still trying to process everything." "Well, while you're processing," Valencia said, rising to her feet, "you should know that Silas called me directly after the gala. He's considering pulling out of the merger entirely. He said your absence confirmed his suspicions that your focus has shifted." "My absence from one event doesn't change the strategic value of the merger," Thaddeus argued. "But for surprise, children might," Valencia countered. "Silas is many things, but above all, he's traditional. Family first, business second. He's been suspicious of your lifestyle for months. Too isolated, too cold," he said. "Not the kind of legacy builder he wants to align with." "My personal life shouldn't affect business decisions." "But it does," she insisted. "You know it does. Perception matters. And now, overnight, your entire image has transformed. The reclusive tech genius suddenly saddled with quadruplets. The media will have a field day." Thaddeus hadn't considered the publicity angle, but Valencia was right. The story would be irresistible to the press. His private life, and by extension the boys' lives, would become public fodder. "I'll have the PR team prepare a statement," he said wearily. "But my priority right now is the boys." Valencia studied him, her expression unreadable. "I never thought I'd hear those words from you. My priority is not the company. Who are you, and what have you done with Thaddeus Mercer?" The question, though asked mockingly, struck a nerve. Who was he now? For 8 years since Octavia's death, he'd been Thaddeus Mercer, CEO of Nexus Dynamics, brilliant but cold, focused entirely on building his technological empire. His identity had been wrapped in stock prices and innovation metrics. Now, suddenly, he was something else too. A father. Valencia moved toward the door. "I need time to think about what this means for us. And you should focus on your new situation. We'll talk later." After she left, Thaddeus stood alone in his study, the magnitude of the changes occurring in his life washing over him in waves. Through the window, he could see the boys exploring the terraced gardens that descended toward the cliff edge, their identical forms distinguishable by their movements. Phoenix racing ahead, Orion stopping to examine flowers, Atlas maintaining a cautious distance from the edge, Zephyr keeping watch over them all. His phone rang. Dominic. "Sir, I have preliminary information on Persephone Winters. It's complicated business stuff," Thaddeus continued, trying to find words a 7-year-old could understand. "Sometimes when companies merge, when they join together, people disagree about who should be in charge." Zephyr climbed onto the leather chair across from the desk. "Is it because you have to take care of us now instead of just your company?" The perceptiveness of the question caught Thaddeus off guard. "Partly," he admitted. "Some people think I can't do both well." "Can you?" The directness of Zephyr's grey eyes, Octavia's eyes, made evasion impossible. "I'm going to try my very best," Thaddeus promised. "Both jobs are important to me." Zephyr considered this answer with the seriousness of a much older child. "The Shark Lady doesn't think you can do both." Thaddeus suppressed a smile at the persistent nickname. "Ms. Reyes is concerned about the timing, that's all. This is a complicated situation for everyone. Are you going to marry her?" The question, repeated from their earlier conversation, deserved a thoughtful answer. "I don't know," Thaddeus said honestly. "When adults get married, they need to want the same kind of life together. Ms. Reyes and I planned our future before I knew about you and your brothers. Now everything has changed." "Do you love her?" Zephyr asked with a child's uncomplicated directness. The question struck at the heart of something Thaddeus had never fully examined. His relationship with Valencia had been built on mutual respect, compatible goals, and physical attraction, a logical partnership between like-minded individuals. But love? The consuming, transformative emotion he had once felt for Octavia? "It's different than what I felt for your mother," he said finally. Zephyr nodded, as if this confirmed something he had already suspected. "Aunt Persephone said Mom was your opposite, that she made you laugh and see beautiful things instead of just useful ones." The description was so precisely accurate that Thaddeus felt a physical ache in his chest. Octavia had indeed been his opposite in many ways. Spontaneous where he was methodical, creative where he was analytical, emotional where he was logical. Their differences had initially balanced each other perfectly until his growing obsession with Nexus had tipped the scales. "Your aunt was right," he acknowledged softly. "Your mother changed how I saw the world." "But then you got divorced," Zephyr pointed out. "Yes, I made mistakes. I focused too much on my work and not enough on our relationship. I thought there would be time later to fix things, but then she died," Zephyr finished for him when his voice faltered. "Yes." A comfortable silence fell between them, father and son linked by memories of a woman only one of them had known directly. "I should get back to the movie," Zephyr said finally, sliding off the chair. "Phoenix will use all the good pillows if I'm gone too long." Thaddeus smiled. "Can't have that." At the doorway, Zephyr paused. "Ms. Reyes doesn't laugh a lot, does she?" The observation, so simple yet so insightful, lingered with Thaddeus long after Zephyr had departed. Valencia didn't laugh often, it was true. Neither did Thaddeus, at least not in recent years. They had built a relationship based on ambition and compatibility rather than joy or spontaneity. Until the boys had arrived, he hadn't recognized what was missing. At precisely 8 o'clock, Thaddeus arrived at Luminescence, one of the city's most exclusive restaurants. Valencia had chosen the venue deliberately. Its private dining rooms offered discretion, and its reputation as a power broker's haven would ensure they were treated with appropriate deference. She was already seated in a secluded alcove, a glass of sparkling water before her. The diamonds at her ears caught the low lighting as she turned to greet him, their facets reflecting tiny prisms across the white tablecloth. "You're punctual," she observed. "I half expected a last-minute cancellation due to some quadruplet emergency." Thaddeus took the seat across from her. "The boys are settled for the evening, with Dominic keeping watch. Eleanor is staying over as well to finalize the permanent custody paperwork." Valencia's perfectly shaped eyebrows rose slightly. "You've assembled quite the childcare team in record time." "Necessity drives innovation," he replied, accepting the menu from the hovering server. "Isn't that what we always say at Nexus?" Once they had ordered and were alone again, Valencia leaned forward, her expression serious. "The board will reconvene tomorrow at 10. Silas spent the afternoon calling each member individually, attempting to salvage his proposal despite your accusations. He's offering significant concessions to anyone who supports him." "Bribery by another name," Thaddeus commented. "Politics," Valencia corrected. "The kind you've always avoided, preferring to let your technical vision speak for itself. That approach won't work this time. This is a battle for control, and Silas is fighting to win. As am I." Valencia studied him over the rim of her water glass. "Are you? Because from where I stand, it looks like your priorities have shifted rather dramatically. Missing critical meetings, bringing children to headquarters, delegating key responsibilities to subordinates. These are not the actions of someone fighting to maintain corporate control." "Perhaps I'm redefining what control means," Thaddeus suggested. Their first course arrived, a delicate composition of seasonal ingredients that spoke to the chef's artistic sensibilities. Valencia began eating with precise movements, her poise never faltering. "That brings me to the reason I wanted to meet," she said after a few bites. "We need to discuss our personal situation in light of these developments." Thaddeus had been expecting this conversation since the boys' arrival. "The postponed wedding." "Yes." Valencia set down her fork, her full attention now on him. "When we became engaged, we shared a vision for our future, one that balanced professional achievement with a carefully planned personal life. Children eventually, perhaps, but on our timeline and terms." "Circumstances change," Thaddeus observed mildly. "Successful people adapt." "Of course, but adaptation should be strategic, not reactive." She reached for her clutch, withdrawing a slim document folder. "I've had my attorneys draft a revised prenuptial agreement that accounts for the changed circumstances. It addresses guardianship considerations, educational trusts for the children, and modified succession planning for your assets." The clinical approach, so characteristic of Valencia, struck Thaddeus as simultaneously impressive and deeply troubling. While he'd been helping his sons settle into their new home, she had been restructuring their potential marriage contract to accommodate their existence. "You've been thorough," he noted, accepting the folder without opening it. "It's what I do," she replied simply. "Anticipate complications and develop solutions." Thaddeus regarded her thoughtfully across the table. Valencia Reyes was, by any objective measure, an extraordinary woman. Brilliant, driven, accomplished in her field. She had built her investment firm from nothing into a powerhouse through sheer determination and strategic genius. They were well matched intellectually and professionally, yet sitting here now, discussing his sons like assets to be managed, he felt a distance opening between them that no legal document could bridge. "The boys asked if you were going to be their stepmother," he said quietly. Valencia's composure slipped momentarily, revealing a flash of genuine uncertainty. "What did you tell them?" "That I didn't know. That adults need to want the same kind of life together to get married." A diplomatic answer. She took a sip of water. "And do we want the same kind of life?" The question hung between them, weighted with implications. Before Thaddeus could respond, his phone vibrated with an incoming call, Dominic's dedicated line. "Excuse me," he said, tension immediately rising as he answered. "Yes, sir." Dominic's voice was tightly controlled. "There's been a situation at the house, nothing life-threatening," he added quickly, "but you should return as soon as possible." "What kind of situation?" A visitor arrived unannounced. Silas Vanguard. He insisted on seeing the boys. Alarm shot through Thaddeus. "Where are they now?" "Secure in their room with Mrs. Zhao. Mr. Vanguard is in the main living area, refusing to leave until he speaks with you directly." "I'm on my way." Thaddeus ended the call, already rising from his chair. "I need to go. Silas is at my house, demanding to see the boys." Valencia's eyes widened with what appeared to be genuine concern. "Why would he want to see your children?" "I intend to find out." Thaddeus threw down his napkin. "I'm sorry to cut this short." "I'm coming with you," Valencia declared, gathering her things. "Whatever game Silas is playing, you shouldn't face it alone." Her unexpected solidarity gave Thaddeus pause. Perhaps there were depths to Valencia he hadn't fully appreciated, capacities for loyalty and support that transcended their professional alignment. "Thank you," he said simply. The drive to Lighthouse Point seemed interminable despite his driver's best efforts. Valencia sat beside him in the back of the car, her expression thoughtful as she gazed out at the darkened coastline. "This is an unusual move for Silas," she observed. "He typically prefers to battle in boardrooms, not private residences." "He's escalating," Thaddeus replied grimly, "using my children as leverage somehow." "Do you think he means them harm?" "No," Thaddeus said after considering. "Silas is ruthless in business, but he's never crossed into physically threatening behavior. This is psychological, an attempt to unsettle me before tomorrow's vote." As they approached the illuminated lighthouse, Thaddeus could see two unfamiliar security personnel stationed at the entrance to his property. Vanguard's people, not his own. "Bringing backup to a private meeting," Valencia noted, her tone hardening. "Decidedly aggressive." When they entered the house, they found Silas Vanguard seated comfortably in the main living room, examining Octavia's book of lighthouse birds, which had been left on the coffee table. He looked up as they entered, his expression betraying no surprise at Valencia's presence. "Thaddeus, Valencia, I apologize for the unorthodox meeting venue, but circumstances called for direct communication." "In my home?" Thaddeus countered coldly. "Demanding to see my children? There's nothing direct communication about that." "Silas, it's intimidation." Silas set down the book carefully. "A strong characterization. I simply wish to meet the young men who have so dramatically altered the trajectory of our merger negotiations. To understand the situation fully, as it were. My sons are not part of any business negotiation," Thaddeus stated firmly. "They're children who have recently lost their guardian and are adjusting to a new home. Your presence here is inappropriate and unwelcome." Silas rose from his seat, his imposing height emphasized by his ramrod-straight posture. "Perhaps so, but then there are many inappropriate elements to our current situation." He nodded toward Valencia, including certain connections that have recently come to light. Valencia stepped forward, her expression cooling to the professional mask she wore during difficult negotiations. "If you have accusations to make, Silas, make them directly. This theatrical approach is beneath you." "Is it?" He removed his glasses, polishing them methodically, as he had during their earlier meeting. "I find transparency often requires a bit of theater to achieve. For instance, the dramatic revelation of intercepted communications at today's board meeting. Quite effective in postponing a vote that wasn't going your way, Thaddeus." "The evidence speaks for itself," Thaddeus replied. Vivian Archer, deliberately, kept information about my children from me, then took a position at your company shortly afterward. Indeed, a concerning sequence of events. Silas replaced his glasses, though perhaps not as concerning as discovering that the person who recommended Ms. Archer for that position was directly connected to the intercepted communications. Valencia's posture stiffened almost imperceptibly. "What are you implying?" Instead of answering, Silas reached into his suit jacket and withdrew a folded document. "This email was recovered from our archive during today's investigation. It's dated approximately 1 month after Octavia Mercer's death." He handed the paper to Thaddeus, who unfolded it with growing apprehension. The printed email showed a conversation between Vivian Archer and an unnamed executive discussing the continued interception of communications from Persephone Winters and the importance of ensuring our mutual associate remains unencumbered by family complications during this growth phase. "The unnamed executive used a private email address," Silas continued, "but our IT department was able to trace the account." The implication hung in the air, heavy with accusation. "This is absurd," Valencia said tightly. "I hadn't even met Thaddeus at that point. I had no connection to Nexus Dynamics or its personnel." "Not directly," Silas agreed. "But you did have connections to Meridian Ventures, which was considering a substantial investment in Nexus at that time. An investment that would have been jeopardized if its brilliant founder suddenly acquired parental responsibilities that might divert his focus." Thaddeus looked up from the document, his gaze moving between Silas and Valencia. "Meridian was your firm before you established Reyes Capital. A tenuous connection at best," Valencia dismissed. "I had left Meridian months before Octavia's death to start my own fund." "Yet you maintained close ties with Edward Harrington, Meridian's managing partner," Silas countered smoothly. "Close enough that when Vivian Archer needed a new position 3 years later, you personally recommended her to me. An unusual courtesy for someone you supposedly had no connection with." Thaddeus turned to Valencia, studying her face for any hint of deception. "Is this true?" "The recommendation, yes," she admitted. "Harrington asked me to place her as a favor. It's standard practice in our circles. But the rest is pure conjecture designed to drive a wedge between us before tomorrow's vote." "Is it?" Silas raised an eyebrow. "Perhaps you should ask yourself why Meridian Ventures would have had such interest in keeping Thaddeus unencumbered by family obligations. What investment strategy might have been compromised?" Before either could respond, a small voice came from the hallway entrance. "Dad?" All three adults turned to find Atlas standing there in pajamas, his serious eyes taking in the tension-filled scene. "You should be in bed," Thaddeus said gently, moving to block his son's view of Silas. "I heard voices," Atlas explained. "Zephyr said someone was here to see us, but Eleanor wouldn't let us come down." Silas stepped forward, his expression softening as he addressed the boy. "You must be one of Thaddeus's sons. I'm Silas Vanguard, a business associate of your father's." Atlas regarded him warily. "You're the one trying to take Dad's company." A flicker of surprise crossed Silas's features. "Business is more complicated than that, young man." "Not really," Atlas countered with a child's devastating directness. "You want what my dad built, so you're trying to make people think he can't. Be a good CEO and a good dad at the same time." The simple assessment, cutting through layers of corporate maneuvering to the essential truth, created a moment of stunned silence. "You're quite perceptive," Silas finally said. "Perhaps you inherited more than just your father's looks." "Atlas, please go back upstairs," Thaddeus instructed, placing a protective hand on his son's shoulder. "I'll be up shortly." After a moment's hesitation, Atlas complied, though not without a final, measuring look at Silas. "Remarkable children," Silas observed once Atlas had gone. "Intelligent, observant. One can see both you and Octavia in them quite clearly. "Why? Are you really here, Silas?" Thaddeus demanded, his patience exhausted. The older man's expression grew serious. "To offer a compromise before tomorrow's vote devolves into a protracted battle that damages both our companies. Despite today's theatrics, the board remains divided. A contested leadership structure during a merger of this magnitude would be disastrous for shareholder value." "What kind of compromise?" Valencia asked, her business instincts engaged despite the tension. "A transitional co-leadership model," Silas proposed. "Thaddeus and I would share CEO responsibilities for 18 months, after which he would assume the chairman role and I would continue as sole chief executive. This gives Thaddeus time to establish stability for his newfound family while ensuring leadership continuity for investors." The offer was surprisingly reasonable, a face-saving solution that acknowledged both Thaddeus's personal situation and his corporate value. Yet something about Silas's sudden reasonableness, coupled with his earlier insinuations about Valencia, raised Thaddeus's suspicions. "Why the dramatic home visit to propose what could have been discussed in the boardroom?" he asked. "I needed to see the situation for myself," Silas replied, his gaze moving around the room, taking in the subtle signs of children now present in the formerly minimalist space. A small sneaker, partially visible under the sofa, a half-completed puzzle on the side table, a toy robot abandoned on the window seat. To understand what's truly at stake. "And what have you concluded?" Silas returned his attention to Thaddeus. "That there are forces at work here beyond simple corporate maneuvering. Forces that have been in motion since before those boys were born." His gaze shifted briefly to Valencia. "Some of those forces may be closer than you realize." With that cryptic statement, he moved toward the door. "Consider my offer, Thaddeus. I'll expect your answer before the board meeting tomorrow. For everyone's sake, I hope it's favorable." After Silas departed, taking his security detail with him, an uncomfortable silence descended on the room. Valencia stood by the window, her profile sharp against the sweeping beam of the lighthouse. "That was a performance designed to create suspicion," she said finally. "Silas is desperate to salvage the merger on his terms." "Perhaps," Thaddeus acknowledged, studying her carefully. "But the email was genuine?" "The existence of an email. From Vivian to someone at Meridian, yes," Valencia conceded. "But I had no knowledge of it, no involvement in any scheme to keep information about your children from you. You must believe that." Did he? Thaddeus wasn't certain. The timeline aligned uncomfortably well. Vivian's interference after Octavia's death, Valencia's later connection to him through mutual business associates, her recommendation of Vivian for a position at Vanguard. Coincidences existed in the business world, but rarely so neatly arranged. If what Silas suggested were true, he said carefully, it would mean our entire relationship was predicated on manipulation, that you sought me out, knowing I had children being kept from me. Valencia turned to face him fully, her expression more vulnerable than he had ever seen it. "That's not who I am, Thaddeus. Whatever flaws I possess, and they are many, I don't build relationships on deception." Before he could respond, Eleanor appeared at the top of the stairs. "Thaddeus, the boys are asking for you. They're concerned about the visitor." "I'll be right there," he called back, then turned to Valencia. "I need to reassure them." "Of course." She gathered her purse, professional composure returning. "We can continue this discussion tomorrow before the board meeting." As she moved toward the door, Thaddeus found himself torn between suspicion and the desire to believe her innocence. Their relationship had always been straightforward, transactional in its honesty. The possibility that it had been built on hidden agendas was deeply disturbing. "Valencia," he called as she reached for The handle. Regardless of tomorrow's outcome, I need to know the truth. All of it. She paused, silhouetted against the night beyond. The truth is rarely simple, Thaddeus, especially in our world. With that, she was gone, leaving him alone with questions that had no easy answers. Upstairs, Thaddeus found all. 4 boys awake and clustered on Zephyr's bed, with Eleanor keeping watch from a chair in the corner. Their identical faces turned to him as he entered, expressions ranging from curiosity to concern. "Is the angry man gone?" Orion asked immediately. "Yes," Thaddeus assured them, sitting on the edge of the bed. "And he wasn't angry, just intense. He wanted to see us," Phoenix said. "Why?" Thaddeus considered how to explain corporate power plays to 7-year-olds. "Mr. Vanguard is someone I work with. He's interested in the company I built, and he's also curious about you because you're important to me." "Atlas said he wants to take your company away," Orion persisted. "Clearly troubled by the concept. He wants to change who's in charge," Thaddeus clarified. "But that's a grown-up problem that you don't need to worry about." Zephyr, ever perceptive, studied Thaddeus's face carefully. "You look worried, though." Thaddeus smiled despite his exhaustion. "That's my job as your father, to worry about the complicated things so you don't have to." Eleanor rose from her chair, legal documents in hand. "The custody paperwork is complete," she informed Thaddeus. "I'll file everything first thing tomorrow." "Thank you, Eleanor, for everything." After the attorney departed, Thaddeus found himself reluctant to leave the boys. Despite the day's corporate drama and Valencia's potential deception, this moment, sitting with his sons in their peaceful room, felt like the only reality that truly mattered. "Will you read to us?" Orion asked hopefully, already reaching for Octavia's book of lighthouse birds. "Of course," Thaddeus agreed, accepting the well-loved volume. As he began reading the familiar story about birds who could only fly together, he felt some of the day's tension melting away. When he reached the final page, where the father bird finally returned to teaching his children to soar, all 4 boys were drowsy but still awake, watching him with those identical grey eyes that saw more than he sometimes wished they could. "Dad," Atlas asked softly, "if you have to choose between us and your company, which would you pick?" The question hung in the air, simple yet profound. Thaddeus set the book aside, looking at each boy in turn, these children who were simultaneously strangers and the most familiar beings he had ever known. "There is no choice," he answered truthfully. "You are my sons. Nothing, no company, no merger, no amount of success is more important than that." The words, spoken aloud for the first time, crystallized something within him. Whatever decisions tomorrow would bring, about Silas, about Valencia, about Nexus dynamics, they would be made with this truth as their foundation. Later, after the boys had finally fallen asleep, Thaddeus stood at the window of his study, watching the lighthouse beam sweep across the darkness. Octavia's letter lay open on his desk, her final words to him illuminated by the lamplight. "They deserve a father, Thaddeus. Not an empire, not a legacy, not a distant benefactor. A father. Can you be that for them? For me?" 8 years after her death, he finally had his answer. The morning of the board meeting dawned clear and bright, sunlight streaming through the windows of the lighthouse home. Thaddeus had been awake for hours, reviewing documents and preparing for the confrontation ahead. His decision about Silas's offer had crystallized sometime in the night, a moment of clarity amid the swirling questions about Valencia's potential involvement in keeping his sons from him. Eleanor arrived early, bringing final copies of the permanent custody paperwork and news from her contacts at the courthouse. "Everything's proceeding smoothly," she assured him as they spoke in his study. "The judge was impressed by the speed with which you've arranged appropriate accommodations and care for the boys. Barring any unexpected complications, your permanent guardianship should be confirmed within the month. Thank you, Eleanor, for everything. She studied him with the perceptive gaze that had made her one of the city's most formidable attorneys. You seem different today, resolved. I am, Thaddeus acknowledged. I've made my decision about Silas's offer, and I'm declining. The compromise would ultimately leave Nexus in his control, which isn't what's best for the company or its mission. More importantly, the co-CEO arrangement would require just as much of my time as full leadership, without the authority to make necessary changes. Eleanor nodded thoughtfully. It's the right call. Sharing power with Silas would mean constant battles that would ultimately detract from your time with the boys. Exactly, which means I need a different solution. Thaddeus handed her a document he had spent most of the night drafting. I want to restructure Nexus's leadership model entirely. Eleanor scanned the proposal, her eyebrows rising as she absorbed its details. This is unexpected, but viable. Legally, yes. The board would need to approve, of course. She looked up, genuine curiosity in her expression. What prompted this approach? Before Thaddeus could answer, a small commotion from the kitchen interrupted them. The sound of childish laughter and the clatter of dishes suggested breakfast was in full swing. That, he said simply, nodding toward the noise. I need a solution that accounts for my new reality, not one that tries to force my reality to fit an outdated model. As they walked together toward the kitchen, Eleanor added, "And what about Valencia? Have you decided how to address Silas's allegations?" "We're meeting before the board convenes. I need answers before I can move forward with any aspect of our relationship, personal or professional." The kitchen scene that greeted them was organized chaos. The boys sat around the island counter, while Thaddeus's chef, now recovered from his initial shock at cooking for children, prepared elaborate breakfast crepes to order. Phoenix was demonstrating how to build a tower with cut fruit, while Atlas carefully documented each attempt in a small notebook. Orion provided enthusiastic but not particularly helpful commentary, and Zephyr supervised the entire operation with the air of a benevolent monarch. "Dad!" Phoenix spotted him first. "Henri is making crepes with our names on them." The chef, a classically trained culinary artist who had previously prepared meals for diplomats and celebrities, smiled, somewhat sheepishly. "The chocolate writing is proving a bit challenging with the longer names." "It looks delicious," Thaddeus assured him, touched by the effort to make his sons feel special. "Are you going to your big meeting now?" Atlas asked, noting Thaddeus's formal attire. "Soon," Thaddeus confirmed, accepting a cup of coffee from Henri. "But I wanted to have breakfast with you first." As they ate, with Eleanor joining them at the boys' insistence, Thaddeus found himself memorizing details of the scene. Phoenix's animated gestures as he described a dream about flying robots, Atlas's careful dissection of his crepe to examine its structural integrity, Orion's syrup-sticky fingers despite multiple napkin interventions, and Zephyr's quiet observation of the entire tableau. These ordinary moments, he realized, were the ones he had been missing in his pursuit of corporate success. The small joys that Octavia had tried to remind him of during their marriage. "Will you be home for dinner?" Orion asked as Thaddeus prepared to leave. The question, so simple yet loaded with expectation, might once have made him hedge, offering vague assurances about trying to make it back. Now, he answered with certainty, "Yes, no matter what happens at this meeting, I'll be home for dinner." "Promise?" Phoenix pressed. "Promise," Thaddeus confirmed, the commitment feeling not like a burden but a privilege. The drive to the meeting location, a neutral venue selected by the board rather than Nexus headquarters, gave Thaddeus time to prepare for his conversation with Valencia. She had suggested meeting at a quiet cafe near the conference center, away from the corporate eyes that would be watching their every interaction at the board meeting. When he arrived, she was already seated at a corner table, a portfolio and tablet arranged precisely before her. The morning light caught the diamond pendant at her throat, his gift on their engagement. "You look determined," she observed as he took the seat across from her. "I am," he confirmed. "I've made several decisions since last night." Valencia studied him with those sharp, assessing eyes that had initially attracted him, the gaze of someone who saw the world as a series of strategic moves, about Silas's offer, among other things. "But first, I need the truth, Valencia, about Vivian Archer, Meridian Ventures, and those intercepted messages." She sighed, her perfect posture slackening slightly. "The truth is complicated, Thaddeus. As I told you last night, I had no direct involvement in keeping information about your children from you. That much I swear. But," he prompted, sensing the qualification, "but I knew more than I've acknowledged," she admitted. "When we first met 3 years after Octavia's death, Edward Harrington at Meridian briefed me about your background. He mentioned that there had been complications following your divorce, a pregnancy that had been handled discreetly to avoid disrupting your corporate trajectory." The clinical phrasing made Thaddeus's stomach turn, his son's existence reduced to a complication to be handled. "And you didn't think this was information I deserved to know when we became involved?" "I assumed you knew," Valencia countered. The way Harrington described it, the situation had been resolved with your awareness, a mutual decision between you and Octavia's family about what was best for everyone involved. "And you believed that? That I would knowingly abandon my own children?" A flicker of discomfort crossed her features. "The Thaddeus Mercer I was briefed on was singularly focused on building Nexus, brilliant, driven, uncompromising. It seemed consistent with that profile." The assessment stung precisely because it contained elements of truth. The man he had been 8 years ago, consumed by ambition and still bitter about his failed marriage, would he have welcomed the news of impending fatherhood? Or might he have seen it as yet another complication to be managed from a distance? "When did you realize the truth, that I'd been kept in the dark?" Valencia hesitated, then answered with uncharacteristic vulnerability. "When I saw your face at the gala last month, watching those families with their children, there was something in your expression, a longing I hadn't recognized before. It made me question the narrative I'd accepted. Yet you said nothing. What would I have said? By the way, your ex-wife might have had your children 8 years ago, based on third-hand information from a business associate?" She shook her head. "I had no proof, no details, only vague implications from a conversation years earlier." Thaddeus absorbed this, trying to separate rationalization from genuine explanation. "And Vivian Archer, your recommendation?" "A favor to Harrington, as I said. He wanted to place her with a competitor to maintain information flow between our firms." Valencia's gaze was direct. "That's the extent of my knowledge or involvement, Thaddeus. I didn't orchestrate some grand conspiracy to keep you from your children. But yes, I had suspicions I didn't share and connections I didn't disclose. For that, I am sorry." The apology sounded sincere, but incomplete. Whether Valencia had actively participated in keeping his sons from him or merely benefited from the arrangement indirectly, she had withheld crucial suspicions once they became romantically involved. "Thank you for your honesty," he said finally, "limited though it may be." Her expression tightened at the qualification. "What happens now?" Thaddeus removed the diamond ring from his pocket, the engagement ring she had left on his dresser the previous evening before departing. "I think we both know." Valencia looked at the ring without reaching for it, her composure remarkably intact. "Because of the boys?" "Partly," he acknowledged. but also because of who I need to be for them. The father they deserve isn't compatible with the partner you expected when we became engaged. People adapt, Thaddeus. Relationships evolve, sometimes, but our foundation was built on mutual ambition and compatible goals. Those have fundamentally changed for me. He set the ring on the table between them. You deserve someone whose vision aligns with yours, not someone who's rediscovering priorities you never shared. Valencia finally reached for the ring, her manicured fingers closing around it with deliberate control. Are you certain this isn't Silas's manipulation succeeding, driving a wedge between us before the vote? Silas may have accelerated the inevitable, but he didn't create the fundamental incompatibility, Thaddeus replied gently. The truth is, I wasn't the man you thought you were marrying, and now I can't be that man even if I wanted to. She nodded once, dignity intact despite the public termination of their engagement. And the board meeting, given our new status, I assume you'd prefer I not attend. On the contrary, your investment firm holds significant Nexus shares. You have every right to be present for this decision. Thaddeus checked his watch. In fact, we should head over now. The board had assembled in a sleek conference room on the top floor of a downtown high-rise, neutral territory for the high-stakes negotiation about to unfold. All 15 members were present, along with key executives from both Nexus and Vanguard, legal representatives, and major shareholders. Valencia took a seat in the observer section, her expression professionally neutral despite their conversation minutes earlier. Silas Vanguard sat at one end of the massive table, silver hair gleaming under the recessed lighting, confidence evident in every line of his posture. When Thaddeus entered, Silas offered a measured nod, clearly expecting capitulation to his compromise offer. Shall we begin? Harold Winters, the senior board member, called the meeting to order. We're reconvened to address the leadership structure for the Nexus Vanguard merger. Mr. Vanguard has proposed a transitional co-CEO model. Mr. Mercer, we understand you have a response to this proposal. Thaddeus moved to the head of the table, tablet in hand, commanding the room with a presence honed through years of product launches and investor presentations. I do, he confirmed. I'm declining Mr. Vanguard's offer. Murmurs rippled through the assembled executives. Silas's expression hardened perceptibly. However, Thaddeus continued before the reaction could build. I'm proposing an alternative structure that I believe better serves both companies and their shareholders. With a gesture, he activated the room's display screens, revealing the restructuring plan he had drafted overnight. Instead of a traditional merger with combined leadership, I propose a holding company model, Nexus Vanguard Holdings, with two distinct operational divisions, maintaining their separate brands and core competencies. Each division would have its own CEO reporting to a joint board. The room fell silent as the implications sank in. It was an elegant solution to the leadership impasse, preserving both companies' identities while creating a unified corporate entity that could compete on a global scale. And the leadership of these divisions? Silas asked, his tone carefully neutral. You would lead Vanguard Technologies, where your operational expertise has created industry-leading efficiencies, Thaddeus replied. I would lead Nexus Innovations, focusing on our core strengths in research and development. And the holding company leadership? Harold Winters inquired. A new position, executive chair, filled by someone with the experience and vision to guide the combined entity without micromanaging either division. Thaddeus paused deliberately. I'm nominating Dr. Margaret Chen from our board to fill this role. The suggestion sent another ripple of surprise through the room. Dr. Chen, a respected industry veteran with experience in both technology development and corporate governance, was an inspired choice, and one that neatly sidestepped The Thaddeus versus Silas power struggle. This structure, Thaddeus continued, allows both companies to maintain their cultural identities while creating the scale needed to compete globally. It also provides me with the flexibility to balance corporate leadership with my family responsibilities. As the board members digested the proposal, examining the projected financial models and organizational charts, Silas leaned forward, eyes narrowed behind his steel-rimmed glasses. An interesting proposition, he acknowledged. Though it raises questions about your commitment to the merger we've spent a year negotiating, this new structure significantly alters the terms. It alters the form, not the substance. Thaddeus countered. The synergies, market advantages, and financial benefits remain intact. What changes is a leadership model that frankly wasn't working even before my family situation evolved. Heads nodded around the table, an acknowledgement of the tension that had existed between the two strong-willed CEOs throughout the negotiation process. I move that we study Mr. Mercer's proposal and reconvene for a vote next week, suggested Patricia Lynn, one of the more analytical board members. This restructuring deserves thorough financial and operational vetting. Seconded, came another voice. As the motion passed and the meeting shifted to procedural matters, Thaddeus caught Silas's evaluating gaze across the table. The older man offered a slight nod, not quite concession, but recognition of a well-played move. The battle wasn't over, but the field had been reframed on Thaddeus's terms. Valencia approached as the meeting adjourned, her professional mask firmly in place despite the personal rejection earlier. Brilliant restructuring, she acknowledged. An elegant solution to multiple problems. Thank you. Reyes Capital will support the proposal, she added, purely business now, assuming the financials hold up under scrutiny. They will, Thaddeus assured her. She hesitated, then asked with genuine curiosity, "What changed, Thaddeus?" "The man I met 3 years ago would have fought to maintain complete control, not propose this kind of power-sharing arrangement." "I discovered something more important than control," he answered simply. "Four somethings, actually." A ghost of a smile touched her lips. "I hope they appreciate what you're building for them." "It's not about appreciation," Thaddeus realized as he said it. "It's about presence, being there for the moments that matter." As promised, Thaddeus returned home for dinner that evening. He found the boys in the kitchen attempting to help Henri prepare a meal with more enthusiasm than skill. Flour dusted every surface, and what appeared to be tomato sauce decorated several cabinet doors. "We're making pasta," Phoenix announced proudly, his face streaked with flour. "From scratch." "I can see that," Thaddeus replied, surveying the cheerful disaster. "It looks involved." "Henri says cooking is chemistry," Atlas reported, seriously measuring ingredients with scientific precision. "And art," Orion added, shaping his portion of dough into what might generously be called a sculpture. Zephyr, as usual, maintained his supervisory role, ensuring everyone had the tools and space they needed. "How was your meeting?" he asked Thaddeus. "Productive," Thaddeus answered, rolling up his sleeves to join them. "I propose some changes that will let me spend more time here." "With us?" Orion asked hopefully. "With you," Thaddeus confirmed, accepting the ball of dough Zephyr handed him. "And the shark lady?" Phoenix inquired, abandoning any pretense of subtlety. "Is she going to live here too?" "No," Thaddeus said gently. "Ms. Reyes and I have decided not to get married. We want different things in life." The boys exchanged their silent glances, communicating in that mysterious way they had. "That's okay," Zephyr finally declared, apparently speaking for the group. "We're enough family for now." "More than enough," Thaddeus agreed, his throat unexpectedly tight with emotion. Later, after a dinner where the handmade pasta had proven more successful than anticipated, Thaddeus found himself on the lighthouse observation deck with all four boys. The evening was clear, stars emerging in the darkening sky as the lighthouse beam began its nightly rotation. "Mom would have liked it here," Atlas said quietly, gazing out at the ocean. "Yes," Thaddeus agreed. "She would have loved it. Especially the lighthouse," Orion added, "since she wrote the story about the lighthouse birds." Phoenix, never one to stay still for long, was examining the mechanisms that controlled the massive lens. "How does it know when to turn on?" "There's a photo sensor," Thaddeus explained, lifting him for a better view. "It detects when the light level drops below a certain point." "Like the birds in Mom's story," Zephyr observed thoughtfully. "They knew when it was time to fly home." The parallel struck Thaddeus deeply. These four boys, guided by some invisible force, had found their way to him at precisely the moment when he needed redirection in his life. Whether coincidence, fate, or Persephone's careful planning, their arrival had illuminated what truly mattered in a way nothing else could have. "I wish you could have known her," he told them, gathering them close as the lighthouse beam swept across the darkening water. "She was extraordinary." "We know her through you," Zephyr replied with surprising wisdom, "and through us. Atlas has her serious thinking face, Phoenix has her laugh, Orion has her imagination. And Aunt Persephone said, I have her heart." "You do," Thaddeus confirmed, seeing Octavia in each of them now that Zephyr had named the connections. "All of you carry parts of her. And parts of you," Atlas added practically. "That's how DNA works." Thaddeus smiled, thinking of how far they had come in such a short time. From strangers huddled at a cemetery gate to a family finding its rhythm, healing old wounds and creating new traditions. As night settled fully over the lighthouse, with the beam now cutting bright arcs through the darkness, Thaddeus realized that Octavia had given him one final, precious gift. Through these four extraordinary boys, she had forced him to rediscover what success truly meant. Not stock prices or market share or technological innovation, but love, presence, and the courage to change course when life revealed a better path. Like the lighthouse beam guiding ships to safe harbor, his sons had illuminated his way home. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.